Hello and welcome to the Miscast table. My name is Jonas.
And my name is Måns, and today we have a brand new warband that we're gonna review. We have the Blackpowder's Buccaneers.
Yeah, and I think thematically this is a home run. It's a 5-fighter warband with a total health pool of 14. And let's take a look at the captain.
Yeah, so we have the captain, Gorlok Blackpowder instead of Blackbeard, I guess. Movement 3, defense characteristic of 1 shield, and he has a total of 6 wounds. But what's interesting about this guy and new about this guy is his Grunderblast ability. It's a range ability, range of 3. He's rolling 3 dice looking for fury with 2 damage. And it has the ability, or maybe the drawback you could call it, ammo, which is very central to this warband.
Yeah, and I think normally this kind of attack would be alright. I wouldn't call it amazing. I know that there aren't that many fighters capable of dealing this kind of attack at a ranged, but this swag counter ammo drawback, I think it really hurts this fighter's attack.
Yeah, so the ammo ability is that this fighter cannot make an attack action unless you first discarded 1 swag counter. At the start of the game you gain 1 swag counter. And how do you gain swag counters after that?
That's the other key mechanic of this warband. Multitude of their companion fighters and minions have a keyword that reads light fingered. After this fighter's successful attack action that targets an adjacent fighter, pick one of the target's upgrades and break that card. When you break that card, gain 1 swag counter. Meaning that if you do manage to land an attack on an opponent that has an upgrade, not only do you get to break it, you get that swag counter and you can fire the Grunderblast on an upcoming turn.
And what's interesting about this that we should mention is that this ability Lightfinger does not work with illusionary upgrades, because the step here after the attack action happens after the illusionary upgrade has already been removed when the damage has been
placed in the discard pile. So.
Yeah.
But I think that this kind of playstyle where you use black powder to fire away the swag counters and your minions and companions to use this light fingered attack is somewhat problematic, because their minions and companions, as we'll soon see, have kind of weak damage.
Yeah, I must agree. It's very difficult to build a playstyle around the Grunderblast, but I think as a mechanic it's interesting, but maybe not very strong.
Yeah, but if you do manage to get yourself in a situation where you have swag counters, by all means, the Grunderblast is a good attack. I think it's sufficiently statted to be rewarding, and especially when you become upgraded. I would just love to see a Grievous upgrade on this gun, because then it would be really on point.
What it has going for it is that it's very accurate, but it doesn't deal a lot of damage. So the problem I see with this warband is that they might be a bit low on the damage side, so they might have some trouble dealing damage.
But Black Powder has another attack, luckily, and I think that saves him a great deal, because his Great Cutlass, a range 2, looking for hammers with a dice roll of 2 and dealing 3 damage is a great attack.
Yeah, it's a great attack, and the range 2 really sends it home for me. It really makes it a lot better than it would have been otherwise. But if we look at the minions, they are a bit less exciting attack-wise, you could say. All of them, both KG and Pegs, if we start with the Gnoblars, they roll 2 dice each, and they are looking for fury, and they deal 1 damage.
Historically speaking, this is too little for an attack action. Whilst you might get them to land their attacks when they are inspired, because then they go from 2 to 3 dice on their attack roll, I think that it's kinda hard to justify activating these fighters to make attack rolls.
Yeah, I think so too. And KG, while he does have a range 3 attack, dealing 1 damage with a snare, but if he does that attack action from a range of 3, then he can't use his light finger reaction because he has to be adjacent to the target. So kind of defeats the purpose of it's like a decent finisher of sort. Range 3 with a snare. Yeah. He also has the keyword fly, which is a bit weird, but I guess he uses his rope like Spider-Man in the cages, I don't know.
Yeah,
in the caves.
Possibly. You just put a fun thought in my head.
Yeah.
But I think that these guys only having 2 wound counters really hurts them. Unfortunately, they are gonna be scoring easy glory points for your opponent rather than yourself if you place them in the front line.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of playstyles relying on the primacy token lately, and these guys are easy pickings.
Easy pickings, you could say. But fortunately for this warband, there are 2 additional fighters, and I think that these ones are really interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. We have Manch and Shriek, the parrot, and the monkey. And aside from being super cool models, the monkey with a knife in his tail, they're also quite strong. And a big reason for that, I think, is their reaction. And how does it read?
Manch and Shriek has a reaction that reads: after a friendly minion makes a move action, push this fighter up to 3 hexes. After this push, this fighter must be within 2 hexes of that minion. Meaning that when KG or Pegs make a move or charge action as a super action, then these guys can make a reaction and set themselves up for an upcoming activation.
Yeah, and Manch does that for KG and Pegs, while Shriek does the same thing for Gorlok Blackpowder.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like the monkey helps the gnobblers and the parrot helps the big boss here.
And this kind of free push reaction is really strong, I think. And especially since you only need to be within 2 hexes when you end that push. Meaning that you gain a great variety on where you can place yourself on the board.
The warbands that can move together seem to be faring quite well this season.
Yeah, and you can use this reaction to set up supporting attacks, or you can use this to be a bit defensive and set up a defensive supporting stance or hinder movement from an opponent. I think there's a ton of usability for this. You could push yourself onto a feature token that you're interested in the end phase. And yeah, I think it's just a great reaction.
Yeah, and that's interesting what you said, that you can put on a feature token, because while Manch looked like a monkey, he's actually not a beast. So you can actually hold objectives. They also have a bit better attacks than the Gnobblers. They both roll 3 dice looking for Fury, and they deal 1 damage each, but with Grievous.
Yeah, and I think Grievous in this case pushes them up quite substantially, because then you go from dealing 1 damage to dealing 1.5 damage on average, and you could easily see yourself dealing a full 3 damage with these fighters if you're really lucky.
Yeah, and the defense rolls are also very good. They're rolling 2 defensive dice looking for dodge, and while they're inspired, they roll 3 defensive die looking for dodge. And that's really on like the upper scale of defense rolls. That's very, very good. So while they are also have a low wound characteristics, they are strong.
Yeah, I think so as well. And finally, we should mention how they inspire, and if it is an important inspiring step for these fighters. Because Blackpowder, he needs to spend a second swag counter, meaning that you need to have acquired a swag counter and then you need to have used it in your Grunderblass.
And I think there are ways other than using the light finger reaction to get swag counters. So I think that this would be quite easy to achieve during the game, but probably not during the first turn. That might be a big ask.
Yeah, I think so as well. And his only upgraded stats are that he gains 1 additional movement and he gains 1 additional attack roll on his Grunderblass. All of his other stats are more or less the same. He can use his upgraded ammo ability to give his attack ensnare if he discards an additional swag counter when firing. And I don't really know if that's a great upgrade. It's always nice to get 1 additional dice when attacking, but I think it's asking quite a lot. You'll be happy if you inspire, but you'll not really care if you don't.
Yeah, the question is if you need it when you roll 4 dice. Do you actually need a snare? Probably not. So that if you have an abundance of swag tokens, maybe.
If you could add Grievous to this attack, it would be
it
really
would
good.
be supreme.
Yeah.
And then we have the other guys. All the other fighters inspire when they make a light fingered reaction. So that means they have to make a successful attack action to an enemy fighter that has 1 upgrade, and they have to break that card.
Yeah. And that's kind of hard. Because then you need to use these lackluster goblin minions to attack a stronger foe. And succeed with it.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a stronger foe because of the upgrades. And this might be problematic because, first of all, your opponent might not be able to play any upgrades during the first turn anyway, if they can't score any surge objectives. And second of all, if you're playing against it Warband, it's quite easy to play around this. This is not a difficult Inspire mechanic to play around. So
you could easily put all your upgrades on the fighter that is furthest away, or put them on a fighter that has great defensive capabilities from the start, so that they are hard to attack with these weaker minions.
Yeah, because this is a very, very normal playstyle when you play these warbands that have one central fighter, is that you beef up one of them. And then you give them like defense boosters and all of that stuff, minus die to your opponent. And you have to hit through all of that to be able to score this.
And the payoff isn't really there either. I mean, okay, they upgrade their attack die so that they have 3 die when they attack, but they still only deal 1 damage.
Yeah, inspiring them is so maybe they roll a lot of dice, and maybe you can give them Grievous as well, because there are range 1 attack actions, but
they do gain 1 additional defense roll, and they really need it to stay alive with that low health bar. But I don't really think it's required. It's nice if it happens, but I wouldn't try to go out of my way to land those light-fingered attacks.
No, not for the inspired reason. But I must say, while the inspired mechanic is a bit rough, I think the light-fingered reaction is very strong. The ability to break your opponent's upgrade cards on almost every fighter in your warband, I think that's a very strong ability.
Yeah, that is probably the selling point of this warband, and I feel like this is something that you have to play very reactively to. You can't really go into every game and have the same play style and mindset, because it's gonna vary greatly depending on what warband you fight against. If you are going to inspire, or if you should divert time to it.
Yeah, I feel like this is probably quite a difficult warband to play well, because you can't just go in guns blazing, literally in this case, I guess.
I mean, one unlucky defensive roll and your fighters are dead, mostly.
Yeah. Dealing 2 damage, it's most fighters can do that. So
yeah, I kind of like them, but let's take a look at the objective cards.
Yeah, I think we should.
So coming up first, we have Aspiring Tyrant. Hybrid. Score this in an end phase if your leader is on a feature token in enemy territory, or 1 or more enemy leaders are out of action. What do you think, Mons?
I think this is pretty alright. It reminds me a bit of Magical Mark, where you must stand on an objective with a wizard, and most warbands only have 1 wizard. And that card is alright. And this is a bit like that, but you also have the additional condition you can score it if the leader is out of action. So I think this is alright. Maybe a B for me.
Yeah, I think it's a fine card. You hit on the points I wanted to mention as well. I think being able to set up a scenario where you get your leader into a feature hex in enemy territory is very likely to happen. But I think it's a bit slow. You might not get this in the first end phase, so therefore I kind of put it in a C bracket for me.
Then we have Bold Tales, Hybrid. Score this in an end phase if 3 or more friendly fighters are on feature tokens that are not in your territory, or 3 or more enemy fighters are out of action.
I think the criteria is kind of nice, but I think that requiring 3 is too much. I don't see myself being able to put 3 friendly fighters on feature tokens outside of my own territory. It's hard.
And you have the card Supremacy, where you need to hold 3 objectives anywhere on the map. And that's quite difficult, and holding 3 in the enemy territory, while you also have this kind of weaker fighters that the warband has. I'm not really sure. 3 or more enemy fighters out of action are quite likely, but only in the
against certain warbands.
And certain warbands, and also in like turn 3. So I don't really like that card.
I kind of agree as well. I like that it has at least 2 glory points as an award, but I put it as a D for me.
Yeah, D or C minus.
Then we have Brash Braggart. Score this in an end phase if your leader is within 2 hexes of 2 or more enemy fighters.
Yeah, and I think this card is quite alright.
Yeah, I think so as well. I kind of put this in the B range because if you can get the last activation, I think this is something that you should have control over. And Blackpowder being able to make range 2 attacks with his cutlass really sells this for me.
Yeah, I think so too. The thing with this is that you are in the hands of your opponent. Your opponent doesn't necessarily need to move their fighters together, but they probably will.
So I like it.
Yeah, I give it a B.
Then we have Broadside. It's a surge objective. Reading, score this immediately after your leader's second or subsequent Grunderbuzz attack action in the same phase.
My first reaction was that I probably liked this card because I thought that if you draw it in your opening hand, you can probably quite easily score it since you start with swag counter. But then I realized it's not that easy to get another swag counter in your first activation. So this might be a bit problematic. If you build a deck around acquiring swag tokens, it might be alright. But I think that playstyle is quite weak. So no, I don't really like it.
I don't see this being easily scored in the first round either. So I put it as a D.
Probably won't be that harsh. A C I can give it. But
Okay.
I don't really like it. And then we have Brutal Belaying. Surge. Score this immediately after a friendly fighter's range 1 or range 2 attack action that took the target out of action. If that friendly fighter had 1 or more supporting fighters.
I kind of like this card actually, because this is one of the mechanics that is gonna eventually trigger. Like, you will be offensive with this warband in some regard. And since you have that great push mechanic on your companions, being able to set them up alongside your fighters, I think that eventually you'll be able to get that supporting attack in, kill one target, and then you get to score a surge objective. But not great either, so C for me.
Yeah, I mean, there are cards that are quite similar to this that might be stronger, that you might want to pick over this. But it's a decent card and it will happen eventually. So yeah, it's probably like a B minus.
I think it's a fine card. You'll consider it, but you might very well consider other cards above it as well.
Yeah, I mean, as surge objective goes, I think there are better ones out there. And then we have Eyes on the Prize. Score this in an end phase if you have 3 or more swag counters. When you score these objective cards, if you have 6 or more swag counters, gain an additional glory point.
This is a really hard card to evaluate, because if there is a playstyle that awards you a bunch of swag counters, this is actually kind of nice, potentially scoring you 3 glory points, but I think the playstyle is too weird. It's kind of counterintuitive, because normally you would want to use your swag counters on Blackpowder so that you get to inspire him.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes against this card completely.
Yeah, I don't really get the point. If you play a playstyle when you want to get swag counters, you want to acquire them so you can use the blunderbuss attack. Why play a playstyle where you acquire swag counters if you're not going to use this attack? Only to play this card? No. I don't like this at all. It's a D for me.
I put it on an E range because I think it's too problematic. I think that just going against the Warband's theme of spending swag counters seems weird.
Yeah, I think that you want to spend them as soon as you acquire them if you have the possibility to do so. So no, don't like it.
Then we have Gold Diggers. It's another search objective, this one being dual as well. Score this immediately after a power step if 2 or more friendly fighters are on a feature token and 1 or more of those fighters are in enemy territory.
I do think that this card is quite alright. I feel like this Warband is also pushing quite hard on the objective holding playstyle and also holding objectives in enemy territory. And this is also search objective is scored directly after a power step, which makes it a lot stronger than if you scored in an end phase. And keeping 2 fighters on an objective and reaching an objective in enemy territory when you have this high movement, especially on the bird, I don't see this being a problem. I think this is a good card that you can quite easily score.
Yeah, as long as you stay on that gloom side so that you get additional defensive capability, because it's gonna take a few activations to set up. But I think it's a fine card. You'll run this if you want to be aggressive. I give it a C.
I'd probably give this like a B+. I think this is a pretty good card because it's feature token, so you can just stay on the gloom side. You don't even have to flip it. So
yeah, like aggressive warbands should definitely consider this.
Yeah, but you need to have like a playstyle around it. You need to want to go to the enemy territory. If it's that's not your playstyle, then this doesn't fit in your deck.
Yeah, but potentially high. You could persuade me, but I would need to play more with this card before I'm certain.
Yeah. Then we have Loaded with Booty. Duel. Score this in an end phase if you have 2 or more swag counters and 2 or more friendly fighters are on a feature token that are not in your territory.
And once we just spoke about going into enemy territory, I think this being a dual requirement asks a bit too much. The swag counter part, in addition to needing to set up your fighters onto feature tokens, is kind of hard.
Yeah, usually cards that have the and requirement are usually quite weak, and this is problematic for a couple of reasons. First of all, you need to have 2 or more friendly fighters on a feature token that is not in your territory. And while that might not seem like a huge difference from Gold Diggers when you need 1, it is. It is a large difference having 2 instead of 1. And then you also need to have 2 or more swag counters, which might be hard to acquire, so that's quite problematic. So no, I don't like this card.
Yeah, I put it in the D range. Arguably it's not all that impossible to score, but it would be something I'd be hard pressed to include in my deck. I think there are other better alternatives.
Yeah, I agree with the D.
Then we have Maneater. It's a search objective. Score this immediately after your leader's ranged 1 or ranged 2 attack action that took an adjacent target out of action if that target had no wound counter during the declare attack action step. So it's basically like gain the primacy token, then you score it.
Yeah, I guess that's what it is. And in that case, there are better cards out there. It's not a terrible card. I'd probably give it like a B- or something, but I probably wouldn't include it.
Yeah, I kind of rank this just slightly below because it does mean that you need to focus a fighter that has 3 health. You're gonna need to use your cutlass on it, and it's too situational, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. It's a bit problematic as well because all of both the minions and the companions here, they only deal like 1 damage. So if they hit something, it's gonna be damaged but not dead, and then you can score this. So you can like hinder your own chances to score this by using their abilities. So that's a bit problematic. So maybe a C.
Yeah, against certain warbands, I could see this being upgraded. Like if you would play against this warband, I think this goes up quite a bit.
yeah, it does.
Like in a mirror match.
And my favorite comparison with Zarbag's Gits, it would also be quite strong. Then we have Smash and Grab. Hybrid. Score this in an end phase if 1 or more of your opponent upgrade cards was broken in the previous phase, or 1 or more enemy fighters who each have 2 or more upgrades are out of action.
I think this card goes into the theme of light fingered, but since it's kind of hard to get that mechanic to trigger in the early phases of the games, this is kind of slow. And even if you do manage to get it in the later stages, it isn't really a great payoff because it's too situational.
Yeah, I don't like it either. The last part here, 1 or more enemy fighters who each have 2 or more upgrades are out of action. That's a big ask. And triggering the
first criteria?
Yeah, triggering the first criteria is problematic as well. So no, I don't think I like this card.
Yeah, I think it's too slow. I mean, this warband does have potential to break upgrades, so I don't think it's unlikely. I just think that it's too unreliable. I give it a D.
Yeah, I agree.
Then we have Tall Tale. This is a hybrid as well, and it reads, score this in an end phase if 1 or more enemy fighters with a wound characteristics of 5 or more are out of action, or one or more surviving friendly fighters each have 3 or more upgrades. This seems hard.
Yeah, the first part is impossible with a lot of warbands. The second part, giving one friendly fighter 3 upgrades, is not impossible, but it's probably gonna take a turn or two, so it's a bit too slow, and therefore I don't really like it. So I'll probably give this like a D or D minus.
Yeah, I think so as well. I have it in a D range. I think you might be in that upgrade stacking deck with lots of illusion upgrades, but I think that there are better cards that outclass this one.
Yeah, but even if you're playing that playstyle, giving 3 upgrades like the first turn, that's a big ask. So you're probably still in like the second turn, and that makes it slow. So no, even in that playstyle, I don't like it. Then we have Treasure Hungry. Score this in an end phase if 2 or more friendly fighters are on a feature token.
I think this is a great objective finally. I think this one is more than easily scored. You only need to put friendly fighters, and it doesn't even need to be in enemy territory.
No, and it's just feature tokens. So I think this is a great card.
Yeah.
If you're playing the objective holding playstyle with this warband, this is an auto-include in my book.
I think it's an include even if you're playing an aggressive warband. I think getting onto feature tokens is something that you'll have in your ability to command. Yeah. And if you get this early, you'll quite likely score it. So I give this an A actually.
Yeah, I'm probably at a B plus or something. It's really easy to score, but it can be problematic. But that's I guess a thing with all of the objective holding warbands that in the later turns, if most of your fighters are dead or something like that, it can be almost dead cards. But it's a really good card still.
Then we move on to some of the Grand Alliance cards. And this one is a worthy one. It's Ordered Reality. It reads Hybrid. Score this in an end phase if 1 or more of your opponent's illusion upgrades was broken in the preceding phase, or each surviving friendly fighters has the same number of upgrades, and they clarify that 0 is a number.
So this card might have the ability to go well with illusionary decks, like when you play an illusionary list, because you're gonna reset the number of upgrades in the beginning of each turn, but you still score this in an end phase. But with warbands with a small amount of fighters, you might be able to keep the upgrade count even. So it's not absolutely terrible, but you have no control over the first part. So yeah, I'll probably give this like a D plus or something like that.
I think it might be interesting to consider. I think this is one of the cards that you need to run a couple of games with to evaluate properly. I give it an optimistic C.
Yeah, I could see that, but I think it also says that 0 is a number, but are you gonna not play upgrades on your fighters to be able to score this? Maybe not, but then again in the first phase you might not be able to give any upgrades anyway, so yeah. Might be. I'll keep my D minus.
Yeah.
Then we have Generous Blessings. Hybrid. Score this in an end phase if 1 or more friendly fighter each have 3 or more upgrades. Or there are 1 or more surviving friendly Nurgle fighters and the enemy fighters have 3 or more wound counters.
This is another one of those where you count the number of upgrades a fighter has, and whilst that possibly seems to be a playstyle for certain warbands, I think that if you are a Nurgle warband, then this could possibly be playable actually, because just the requirement of having 1 surviving friendly Nurgle fighter and enemy fighters having suffered 3 wound counters seems like something that should occur naturally, and if you are in the later stages of the game, you might have gotten those 3 upgrades. It's not great, but I think it's a fine card. C for me.
I'm probably gonna rate it a bit lower because I think like you have the Dread Pageant, which inspire when you have is it 5 or 6 wound counters, and that can be hard to score because enemy fighters die and then the count resets, and that counts both friendly and enemy fighters, and that can be problematic to score to inspire that. So I probably think that part, the second part of the card, might be more difficult to score. That said, if you play a warband where you stack upgrades, maybe it could be played, but it's a D card for me.
Yeah, I think if you are in those upgrade stacking, you want the second criteria for scoring to be really good, or it has the upside of adding additional glory. But yeah, let's agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Then we have Path of Death. This is a Grand Alliance Death card. It's a dual objective that reads: score this in an end phase if 2 or more enemy fighters are out of action and there are no enemy fighters in your territory or no one's territory.
Yeah, this is a bit problematic. There are other cards that reads the same way, like there are no enemy fighters in your territory, but it's very difficult to control that. You can't really control, or I mean, you could kill your enemy fighters, but it's not that easy.
Yeah, but I think this is like a third phase objective, and I should mention that it awards 3 glory point. And if you are that aggressive death warband, I think this is actually kind of nice.
Yeah, it's not unplayable, but I don't like giving away the control to my enemy. Like things like there are no enemy fighters in your territory or in no one's territory. You don't have that much control over that, and that always scares me, giving away control.
But I think if you are the aggressor, like if you put on like no breaks, you go on to their side of the field, you attack.
Yeah.
Like every activation in the first one and second phase, action phase, is gonna be a charge action. Push.
Yeah, and then 3 glory is quite decent, so I probably give it a C, but I'm not super impressed.
I think this is a potentially good card. I think this is a B or possibly even a B plus.
I see your point, but the control freak in me doesn't like it.
Yeah.
Then we have Path of Destruction.
Score this in an end phase if there are more enemy fighters out of action than there are surviving enemy fighters, and there are more enemy fighters out of action than there are friendly fighters out of action.
It's kind of hard to set up in advance a scenario where you'll have absolute control over how many surviving enemy fighters there are going to be in comparison to your own. But it does award 2 glory point if you are the elite Morgax Crushas, perhaps comes to mind, able to take out fighters more easily than they take out you. I could see this being a card to consider.
Yeah, I must agree. Like if you have the elite warbands with 3 fighters, the strong ones, then this card could probably be alright. It's probably a dead card in turn 1, but from turn 2 it can be quite good. But if you are matched up against another elite warband, it might just as well be a dead card. So
if you are the aggressive warband and you have that kind of playstyle, this goes right into your game plan. You don't really need to do anything for this to be scoreable, as long as you have like good dice rolls and you are playing a okay-ish game.
Yeah, I think this is quite okay card, or maybe I give it a B minus or something like that.
Yeah, I think this has potential. I'll consider B as well. And then we look at Find a Path. It's a hybrid objective. Score this in an end phase if 2 or more friendly fighters are in edge hexes that are not in your territory, or 1 or more friendly hunters are in edge hexes in enemy territory.
I mean, in the right warband, this is quite easily scored. Having 1 hunter in edge hex, that's not a problem. It only awards 1 glory, but still it's so easily scored. So I think that this is a good card. It's very hard to find a scenario where you can't score this.
Yeah, and having that out of either having a hunter in your warband, which is something you do have control with when you pick this card, or you could just forgo using the hunter and instead just having 2 other fighters get onto those HXs. I think this is a fine card.
Yeah, I think it's a good card.
I'm not excited to play it, but I'll definitely consider it if I'm an aggressive warband.
Yeah, I'd probably give this a B plus if you play it with in a hunter warband. I think it's good.
Yeah, I think so as well. B or B minus for me.
Then we have Going In for the Kill. Duel. Score this on end phase if each surviving friendly fighter is in enemy territory and there are more surviving friendly fighters than there are surviving enemy fighters.
I kinda disapprove of this due to the first condition being so very hard. Each surviving fighter has to be in enemy territory. And if you are an aggressive warband, sure, But then you also need to take into account that there needs to be more surviving friendly fighters than enemy fighters.
Yeah. You could,
Perhaps that aggressive elite warband would like this.
yeah, you could play like a real monster deck with Path of Destruction, Path of Death. No, you can't because they're different. So you actually can't do that. But you can stack one of them. You can stack Path of Death with going for the kill or Path of Destruction for going in for the kill. And they kind of go together quite nicely. But then again, each surviving friendly fighter is enemy territory. Also quite a big ask, and you're in the hands of your opponent. So,
and it's not only that you need like just not being able to count like the no one's territory, no man's land.
Yeah, and I think like comparing this to Path to Death, I think the Path to Death is better, and I also think that the Path of Destruction is better as well. So
C plus. C. I think it's a fine card still. I think it's a card you want to consider.
yeah,
There's two glory points in the right deck.
Yeah, in the right deck it might work. So yeah, C.
Then we have Indifferent End. Surge. Score this immediately after a friendly fighter's attack action that takes an enemy fighter out of action if that enemy fighter had one or more illusion upgrades at the start of the attack action.
Yeah, I don't like this at all, especially with how seldom the illusionary upgrades are played at the moment, and you're completely in the hands of your opponent here, that he needs to play illusionary upgrades. You both need to play them, and he needs to put in a fighter, and you need to do an attack actions and take that enemy out of action. So there's so many asks here.
I think this is unplayable. I think this is the first F.
Yeah, this is unplayable as well. I don't like it at all.
Yeah, it does have Surge.
Yeah, if everyone started to play like only illusionary upgrades for all the 10 upgrades, then it might be playable. But
I don't see that happening anytime soon.
No. So no, it's unplayable.
Then we have Last Stand. It's a dual objective. Score this in an end phase if each friendly fighter is adjacent to one or more friendly fighters, and each friendly fighter is within 2 hexes of one or more enemy fighters.
So your entire warband basically needs to be grouped up here, and then the enemy also needs to be close enough to be in range of all of your fighters, at least within 2 hexes of all your fighters. So it's all right, but I think it might be too difficult, and especially if you're playing a best of 3 and your opponent knows you have this, very easily avoidable.
Yeah, I think the trick here is that you are in the end of the game, fighters have died on both sides, and you are down to your last 2 surviving fighters, and then you stack them together and try to score this after your opponent has made their final attack and activation. But as you said, I don't see this coming together nearly often enough to warrant including this in a deck.
No.
And whilst 2 glory points is kind of fine for this kind of requirement, I think it's too unreliable. I think it goes in the D, possibly even E tier for me. I think I'll put it in the E tier.
I think it's better than that. I think it's probably like C or something. But yeah, it's a bit problem. I like cards a lot better that you can score the entire game without problems. I don't like cards that are meant for stage 3, like the later stage of the game. The best card can be scored throughout the entire game without problems, and this is not one of those. No. But I still probably give it a C when compared to going in for the kill and Path of Destruction and those.
Yeah, perhaps if you are exactly the right warband of only you only have 3 fighters to start with, and you are an aggressive warband that seeks to stack up attacks. But yeah.
Then we have Let Shadows Lie. Score this on end phase if each surviving friendly fighter is 2 or more hexes from the nearest cover hex, block hex, or lethal hex.
I think this is a really good card. I think this is something that a controlling player would like to set up on his or her own terms, and is going to be able to do so as well. Because if you control your side of the board, and you control your placement at the start of the first round, then you could potentially score this in the end of the first round. quite reliably.
Yeah, I think so too. You can set it up so you can score this without moving a single fighter from the beginning. You can set it up like that most of the time if you're playing a warband with 3 fighters. And the 2 or more hexes, that's a quite large range as well. This is one of those cards I like because you're able to score this during any part of the game. This is never useless, which is why I like it. So for me, this is easily a B.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think it's a B, potentially A in certain deck that doesn't necessarily want to be that aggressive, but just want to play on their terms and set up everything before they strike. Yeah. So I kind of like this.
Yeah, I already planned like a deck I'm probably going to include this in, that you're going to face off against. So yeah, I like this card.
Interesting. And finally, we have Make a Path. It's a dual objective. Score this in an end phase if your leader has 1 or more charge tokens and is in enemy territory. And 1 or more enemy fighters are out of action.
I think this is good. It falls very good into the place. Not that this is a Blackpowder Buccaneers card, but it fits really well with the playstyle they're trying to push on that warband. With the aggressive style, you're gonna play in your opponent's part of the board. So yeah, it fits right into the Buccaneers. But in every like aggressive warband, this is really good because all you need to do is to charge in an enemy territory, and one of his fighters need to be out of action, which they will be sometime. So
yeah, and I think the good part about this is that it isn't necessarily that your leader has to accomplish anything. Like Miari's Purifier, if your other fighters have taken out 1 fighter out of action, then you can make a charge action with your leader wizard, and he doesn't even need to kill anything. It just needs to have that charge token, and you could potentially add that charge token via other power cards as well. So I think this is a really good, versatile card.
Yeah, I like this card a lot. Probably like B+, A-. The only thing that I kind of have against these cards is that if your leader is dead, it's a dead card. Like if you have something that says Magician, if your Magician is dead, it's a dead card. But that said, it's really easily scored, and yeah, it's probably B+ or A- for me.
Yeah, I think B for me, just because of your notion, it has to be your leader and he has to be alive.
Yeah. But in like the right warband, like Kainan's Reapers and stuff, with the strong leader, he should be alive.
Moving on to the power cards, we have first up Been There. It's a reaction card that reads, play this after an enemy fighter's charge action. Your leader makes a 1 move action. After that move action, your leader must be adjacent to that enemy fighter. So it's kind of like counter charge.
Yeah, it's a lot like counter charge, and
it's restricted, so only Blackpowder can do it.
Yeah, but I think this is quite a good card. When your opponent makes a charge action, you can end up next to them. And he has pretty strong close range attacks where you can hit back onto the opponent after that. So it's like a free move action, and then you can hit right after that. The problem, I guess, is that it is restricted to Blackpowder. But yeah, in my mind, this is a good card. Probably a B card for me.
Yeah, I think it's interesting as well. It's that move action. You do put a movement token on Blackpowder, so he can't really position himself anywhere else for the rest of that turn. But yeah, B sounds fine for me. I'd probably consider this most times I'm playing these ones.
Yeah, I agree. Then we have done that. Reaction. Play this after an adjacent fighter's failed attack action that targets your leader. Gain 1 swag counter.
Also restricted to Blackpowder, and honestly speaking, I'm not really a fan of the swag counter gimmick. I think once the Grunderbus is a good attack action, I'm not particularly interested in spending all my activation time and resources on getting swag counters.
I must agree, and there's also the need to make a failed attack action. If it was just an attack action against your leader, then maybe, but...
he has terrible defensive roles, so it basically comes down to your opponent failing their attack action, because Blackpowder only rolling 1 defensive die isn't really always going to be able to defend himself.
No. So I don't think it's a terrible card, especially if you're playing like a swag playstyle, which I don't think will work, I guess, but it's probably a C minus or something like that.
For me, this is a D card. Fury of Claws. Choose one friendly companion. The chosen fighter makes one of the attack actions on their fighter card.
I think this is super good. This is just a free attack action with one of the companions, and that's the monkey, mage, and skeet. What is it called? Yeah, the bird. And they roll three dice each. They have grievous, and when they're inspired, they also have like a stagger and then snare. So this is just good. Just a free attack.
I think this is great. You'll probably always want to consider this card. I think this is an A.
Yeah, it's an A for me. I think you need to have very good reasons not to include this.
Yeah.
You need to think very, very carefully if you ever decide to exclude this card. Definitely A for me.
Yeah, and because this also goes right into the playstyle of light fingers, you get to trigger that if you make a successful attack.
Yeah, for sure. Then we have Gold Rush. Choose up to 2 friendly fighters other than your leader. Push each fighter up to 2 hexes towards the feature token that is closest to that fighter in enemy territory.
I think this is a weird card, but it could potentially be alright. I don't think it's a great card, but even if you only get to push 2 fighters 1 hex each, that's probably what you want to do in certain situations. And at times you only want to push 1 fighter 1 hex. This being restricted that you can't push your leader is a slight downside, but I think it's a C card.
I think it's probably a lot better than that, to be honest, because of course you need to play the playstyle that you want to be in enemy territory and you want to hold objectives probably, but you can use this to put your fighters onto the objective even, and you can like make a charge action into enemy territory, hit the fighter, play this, and then you move your fighters away towards the feature hex, and I think there's a lot of versatility with this. So for me, this is probably like a B+.
Yeah, the kind of cool thing about this one as well is that since you are having that mage and shriek companions in this deck, you could make the charge action with the goblin minion, and then have mage follow up with the reaction movement, and then push both of them afterwards.
Yeah, so you can go in, you can get the supporting attacks, and you can push both of them away and out of harm's way. So I think there's a lot of upsides to this. So it's probably B+.
You kind of sold me. Like I would need to be in that kind of play style if I would consider this, but potentially it could be a B, as you said.
Yeah.
Then we have Grand Theft. The first ranged 1 attack action made by a friendly fighter in the next activation has ensnare. Gain 1 swag counter after resolving that attack action.
I also think that this is a very good card. I said before that I'm not really a fan of playing like this swag stacking playstyle, but this is just good. I mean, you just need to resolve an attack action and you get the swag token, and you need to have swag counters to inspire anyway. So, and I don't think there's any downside to having them. There's no downside to having them or using the attack. So this is just good.
Yeah, the downside is that you need to put this card in your deck. But
Yeah.
I think that the first effect of this card is that you gain and snare when you make that attack action. And that is kind of alright. I don't think it's a great card. I think it's fine still. So I'll give it a C.
I think this card is a lot better than that actually. I think it's a lot, both because of the snare, you gain the swag counter. This is probably like an A- for me.
That high?
Yeah, I think it's that
Really?
high. You gain and snare, and you gain a swag counter. And even if that playstyle isn't very strong, having it, I think, is strong. Because you can always make use of that attack action. So I like this card a lot.
Okay, I hear you. I'm not all that sold on it yet, just because ensnare is only against certain fighters. There are plenty of fighters that have what's it called, shields for defensive roles, and against those ensnare doesn't really do anything, and I'm not really interested in gaining swag counters really.
Yeah.
But looking at the next card, Hasty Shot, it reads discard one power card, meaning that you need to play this card and then discard one card as an additional cost. When you do, your leader makes one Grunderbus attack action with -1 die, but you get to disregard the ammo ability, which doesn't apply.
Yeah. This is a tricky one. Is one attack action with -1 die worth 2 cards? I guess is the question. And I don't know. I guess that's my answer. I don't really know. I don't think a lot of people I think this card is really strong, but I'm not so sold, I guess.
I kind of like it because it's definitely better if you draw it in the early stage of the game, because then you just redraw and refill. But being able to make a range 3 attack action in the power step, even if it's a downgraded one, feels strong to me.
Yeah, I guess that feels strong, but
and you get any upgrades, like if you have upgraded Black Powder in any regards, you get to add that to the Grunderbus attack action as well. So the only downside is that you get to roll with 1 minus die.
Yeah, I guess so. But
and that cost of resources.
Yeah, but I still probably only give it like a C. I don't like it at all as much as I like.
I kind of like this. This is a B for me. I could possibly even go up to an A minus. I think this feels like a worthwhile inclusion in your game. Even if you don't play the swag, I would play this even if I didn't have any cards that cared about the Grunderbus, just because making additional attack actions is kind of strong.
Yeah. Maybe you can convince me after we played a few games.
Maybe.
Yeah. Then we have makeshift munitions. In the next activation, your leader's Grunderbus attack action has -1 damage to a minimum of 1 and does not have the ammo ability.
Reducing the damage, however, that I feel is too much. I think that if you make Black Powder only deal 1 damage, it isn't really worthwhile. It's too little.
Yeah, I don't like it mostly because if you compare this to like the monkey, for example, he rolls 3 dice and he deals 1 damage with Grievous. It's just weaker. It doesn't really seem worth it at all. I guess you have the added range, but
you could just use the goblin instead if you.
Yeah, I guess so. It doesn't feel worth it at all.
Yeah, I would much rather just activate one of my other fighters instead of playing this card.
Yeah, it's very like specific situations. If your opponent has one life left and you can finish them off, but it's not worth including it for that like just in case scenario. So this is probably a D for me.
I think it's
D+.
an E.
Yeah.
I really don't like the minus damage upgrades. I'm looking to deal damage, not like lessen the impact.
Yeah.
Then we have punitive damage. Reaction. Play this after an enemy fighter's attack action that targets an adjacent friendly fighter other than your leader. Deal 1 damage to the attacker.
I think that this card is pretty good. A lot of those like deal 1 damage cards, you have like the toxin cards and those are pretty strong and come in clutch a lot of the times. And also when you have the illusionary upgrades, we don't have that many of them. We got more in this set and in the illusionary might card deck. So this is probably gonna go up in power the more illusionary upgrades people are gonna play. And I think this is good. I think this is really good because it also has that it targeted an adjacent friendly fighter. It's not successful attack action or failed attack action, it's just targeted.
But that is one of the things I wanted to add in, because since all of your minions and companions have so little health, this basically reads that it needs to be a failed attack action, because if the attack action succeeded, your minion and companion is going to be dead.
Yeah.
Unless the opponent deals a mere 1 damage.
Yeah, I guess so in that case. But if they fail the attack action, you can still play it.
Yeah, then you can play it, and as long as they don't push you, and that's also like one of the downsides.
Yeah, but they have really good defensive rolls, a lot of them. So
Yeah.
I think that this is worth it.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. It sounded like I was being harsh on the card. I think this is a good card.
It's a good card, but it's not like it's not A plus because of the conditions you said here. So I'm probably like a B plus or something like that. I'm probably gonna include this most of the time because there's almost always gonna be some time in the game where you can use this.
And then we have a Reckless Raid. +1 dice to friendly fighters range 1 attack actions. -1 defense from friendly fighters to a minimum of 1. The effect persists until the end of round.
Okay, so the funny thing here is that your team goes on some kind of rampage, and the downside isn't really there because some of your fighters are only rolling 1 defensive die to the start anyways. And being able to stack on additional dice when you have Grievous feels kind of good. And this persisting until the end of the round, I think this is a balanced card. It has the drawback of losing defensive capabilities, but I like it.
Yeah, I kind of like it. I mean, the 2 goblins doesn't have a lot of defensive rolls, but the monkey and the parrot roll quite a lot of defensive dice, so this is gonna impact them a little bit. And they also roll so many dice, so they're quite likely to get Grievous anyway, but upping that chance by 1 is probably still worth it. This feels like a quite alright card. And you can play it, you need to remember, you can play this any part of the round. You can play it on your turn 4, or on your 4th activation, right before the end of the turn, and then it's only upsides. You don't have to play it on turn 1, so I think this is a good card.
Yeah, because you get to decide when you do play it, and as you mentioned, if your monkey or parrot are likely to be attacked in the next round, I would avoid playing this because I value those companions quite highly. But I give this a C plus, B minus.
Yeah, I'd probably give this a B, solid B, because you have control over when you play it, so it doesn't have to be a downside at all, especially if you have the last activation. So, yeah.
Yeah, good card.
Then we have Snack Break. Choose 1 friendly fighter adjacent to your leader. The chosen fighter is taken out of action.
Heal your leader for 2.
This is a really weak card, I think, because if you take one of your fighters out of action, you are gonna give your opponent 1 glory point. And even if they would have killed that fighter anyways, they would at least have been forced to use an activation on doing so. This basically just gives them that glory point without the required input from their part. And if I wanted to heal my fighter, I would just play Healing Potion instead.
Yeah, I mean, Healing Potion has
no drawbacks, and you get to heal 1, you potentially get to heal that 2 as well.
Yeah, Healing Potion is better than this card, and that card is rarely played. And I agree with you as well. Taking a fighter after action is a problem, not only because you give your enemy a glory point, but as you said as well, they needed to spend at least 1 activation to take it out. So you basically given them extra activations as well, if you look at it that way. So don't like this card. Probably a D minus for me.
Yeah, I won't go as far as say it's an F, but I think it's an E. I wouldn't play this very often, and I don't particularly intend to find out exactly how bad it is.
Me neither.
Then we have Cash Compass. Reaction, it's an upgrade. Reaction, after this fighter's activation, push this fighter up to 2 hexes towards the nearest feature token. At the end of the action phase, if this fighter is on a feature token that is not in your territory, gain 1 swag counter and this fighter is inspired.
I also think this is pretty strong. It's quite similar to the other card we have, Gold Rush, where you push your fighters as well. And pushing your fighter onto a feature token, if you're playing an objective holding playstyle, and becoming inspired at the same time, that just seems good. The downside, I guess, is that it is an upgrade and not a ploy.
And I forgot to mention, it is restricted to minions.
Yeah, so you can only use it in this case on the 2 Gnoblars. But I still think it's quite alright. The problem is that it's restriction to minions and that it's an upgrade and not a ploy. So that probably puts it at the B for me. But I would definitely include this if I'm playing an objective holding playstyle in this
Yeah,
Warband.
I kind of the thing that seals it for me is that I want the push effect, but then you get the added bonus of inspiring your fighter and getting that swag counter. And I don't value the swag counter that much, but inspiring the Gnoblars is kind of good because of all the fighters in this warband, they gain the most from being inspired.
Yeah, there's just so many upsides. You get to push the minion, and you get both a swag counter and you get to inspire. It's so many upsides.
Then we have Legendary Looter. Action.
Choose one friendly fighter and discard one swag counter. When you do, give the chosen fighter one upgrade without spending any glory points. Then give this fighter one charge token. And it's restricted to Blackpowder and minion.
This is ridiculous. This card, I don't understand why they made a requirement of this being an action. Just being forced to discard swag counters alone would probably have been sufficiently downside, because this card does nothing but help your opponent.
Yeah, it's actually trash because you both need to discard a swag token, so you need to have a swag token or swag counter, and when you do, you get to give them an upgrade, but then you also give them a charge token, which is also a huge downside. So you spend one entire action on doing this, and you prohibit your fighter to do anything more because you gave them a charge token. And you have discarded a swag counter.
Yeah, I mean, like, ideally, if you got this in your opening hand, and you scored a surge objective, and then you played this upgrade onto that fighter, intending to use it, then you could just have just used that glory point to give the fighter the upgrade in the first place.
yeah.
This is stupid. I mean, why didn't anyone playtest this card?
I don't like it at all.
I think this is fair.
There's so much problems because
Even if you can think, oh, you can use this in the first activation to give your fighter like an upgrade for free, but you can't because you need to spend a glory point, give them this card, and then use this to give them a new. It doesn't work. It's a terrible card. This is like the first F for me. This is actually unplayable.
This is unplayable for sure. F. Don't put this card in your deck. Don't ever use it. Then we have Liberated Map. Action. Also an upgrade. If this fighter is an edge hex and has no move tokens, place this fighter in an empty edge hex and give this fighter one move token. At the end of the action phase, if this fighter is on a feature token that is not in your territory, gain one swag counter and this fighter is inspired. I kind of like that compass map theme. I just don't really feel like this is all as much worthwhile as the compass is.
I think this is a lot worse for many reasons. First of all, he needs to be in an edge hex and have no move token. I guess there are ways you can... Or are there any starting hexes that are in edge hexes? They are, right?
Yeah, I think there are.
So then you could use it that way.
But you would still need to get the fighter this upgrade before you get to use it with him, because it costs a full activation, and you also need to give them this upgrade, meaning that you need to have scored some glory before you can do it. I think it's too slow.
I guess you don't need to use the action. You can just stand in a feature token and you gain a swag tank token and this fighter is inspired. So if you're playing a swag counter playstyle, maybe. But I think the action is a bit too much of a ask, to be honest.
Yeah,
so.
I really don't like the action part of this card. I think it's too slow, and I'm not really interested in just spending my glory points to position my Gnoblars on obscure tiles so that they can award me swag counters.
No, it's probably just better to make a regular move action and you put a push card in your deck. I don't like it at all. It's not terrible, but compared to Cash Compass, it's a lot worse.
Yeah, it's E for me. I wouldn't easily consider this. D if I were really heavily invested in the swag counter mechanic.
If you're in the swag counter, I think you probably should include this. So then it's probably a B, but I think that playstyle is weak. So
I wouldn't place it as hard because I mean you need to. I think you need to consider this card in accordance to how strong is the mechanic, and I don't think swag counters is nearly as rewarding as it should be.
No, I think it's a weak mechanic. So in that sense, you're all right. So I'll probably give this like a maybe a D plus or something.
Yeah.
And then we have more powder reaction. Use this after a power step. When you do, in the next activation, this fighter's Grundlerbrush attack action has 1+ range and -1 dice to a minimum of 1.
I'm not really looking to make Black Powder an even more ranged fighter. I think this isn't really aligning with what you want to do with that kind of fighter. He is strong, and you want him up front using his cutlass. Possibly you could snipe someone with this kind of range upgrade, but costing a whole upgrade, I don't really like it.
It costs a whole upgrade, and you get -1 die in the next attack action, and
I guess you trade it for +1 range, but a range of 3 should be enough most of the time, and he's strong enough that you shouldn't be afraid to keep him in the kind of close range. So
yeah,
I don't really think it's worth it.
And I think there is one like semi-hidden downside, and that is that you need to use this after your power step, so that you need to plan just slightly ahead.
Yeah, there are playstyles that play around the reaction mechanic, making multiple reactions. So I guess then it could work, but I haven't seen that playstyle employed, and it's probably because it's not very strong. So yeah, it's probably like
I think it's a D.
Yeah, C-, D+. More shoot. Reaction. Use this after this fighter's Grundlerbrush attack action. When you do the following twice. Scatter 1 from the target's hex, then deal 1 damage to any fighter in the end hex that has not already been dealt damage by this reaction in this step.
I think this is a kind of fun upgrade. I don't know if it's all that good, because it does require the thing that you are shooting at to be adjacent to something. And then you also need to scatter and hit, and whilst I do consider it being somewhat likely that you do scatter and hit something, it's not great. I think it's a D.
I think it's a really fun card, thematically very fun, but I also agree that it's probably not as strong, both because, as you said, they need to be adjacent, the enemy fighter you're shooting at, and it scatters, which is unreliable. So in that sense, I guess it's probably a D. But it's super fun card. I like the flavor of this card a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Coming up, we have Pointy Bits. This is an upgrade that goes onto Black Powder or his minions. If this fighter is a minion, this fighter's ranged 1 attack actions as grievous. But if you put it on Black Powder, he gains the following reaction. Use this during this fighter's Grundlerbrush attack action after the declare attack action step. When you do, this attack action has cleave and -1 dice to a minimum of 1 until it has been resolved. First of all, I think the wording and phrasing of this card is problematic. This isn't a clean design.
Yeah, they don't make it that easy. I think this is probably... if you look at the minions, for example, one of the minions, he has only a range 1 attack action. The other guy has a range 3 attack action. So if you use him at a range, this doesn't work with the Grievous. So that it says this fighter's range 1 attack action is a bit problematic. I see no reason why it just couldn't say a fighter is a minion and this fighter's attack action has Grievous. Because he's not that strong to begin with. So
hard time to see how it will be overpowered that way.
I don't really easily see, like, did this come in when they play tested this card? Was it a huge problem that...
Was he way too strong with his
Yeah.
two damage with Grievous?
I think I don't see it. I kind of like adding Grievous, because then you upgrade the Goblin Fighter to being almost reliable. I think if you have them inspired and then you add Grievous to them, they actually become kind of alright.
Yeah. And I guess the other part with the Black Powder stuff here, that you can gain cleave on the cost of -1 dice.
That is kind of alright in of itself.
Yeah, but
against certain warbands.
Yeah, it is, but cleave is a lot less prevalent than in snare. Or I mean,
defensive rolls of shields and block.
Yeah, about 60% of the fighters use the dodge mechanic instead of the shield mechanic. So it's only usable against about 40% of the fighters. But it has like dual, it can be used both on the minions and Blackpowder. So I guess that makes it alright. It's quite a versatile card, but it's weird worded and I have no idea what it is.
It's only range 1 attack actions.
Yeah, and when you add everything together, I think you come up with a card that isn't really there yet. It's wordy and doesn't really do all that much for the cost of 1 upgrade slot. I'd give it a D. I don't think it's terrible. I just think that there are other cards you should consider before you look at this card.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably a D for me as well.
Then we have Scavenged Shot. While this fighter is on a feature token that is not in your territory, you can ignore the ammo ability of this fighter's Grunderbass attack action. After this fighter makes a Grunderbass attack action, if you ignore the ammo ability, deal 1 damage to this fighter. So the trick here is that you are standing on the feature token and just like the picture, you're loading your Grunderbass with the gold and plunder and then you just fire away. But it does hurt.
Yeah, I guess it does hurt. But I think that this is an alright card. I think this is pretty good. Depending on how strong this ability is. But the ability to use it without having swag counters is very good. Because if Blackpowder's attack action didn't have any drawback at all, then it would be super strong. If you didn't have to use the ammo ability and the swag counters and all that. And this basically makes it so at the cost of 1 life. And is it worth it? I think it could be.
Yeah, like the option of being able to decide when you use this and when you don't use it sounds kind of right, but I still think that you need to spend a whole upgrade on getting there, and then you need to get onto a feature token, so you need to really set this up.
Yeah,
I think it's a interesting card. It's really hard to evaluate, but I still think that the cost of dealing damage to your own fighters is a real cost that isn't, you can't undersell it. Like, you need to be aware that he is by no means immortal, and just by adding 1 damage token puts you that much more in lethal range for your opponent. So therefore I think it's a C at best.
yeah, I'd probably put a C plus or something like that. It's a decent card, but there are a few drawbacks as well. And I do like the card. I'm definitely gonna play it.
I mean, the dream scenario is just placing Blackpowder on a kind of central hex, and then you just use 4 activations and you just shoot with the blunderbuss.
Yeah,
And this card would allow that playstyle, but I don't think that, like, there is some kind of theme with the other upgrade cards that you just stack every upgrade onto Blackpowder and then it becomes some kind of cannon turret.
Yeah, there's some kind of like Exodia stuff you can do when he's like immortal and just kills all the enemy fighters in 4 turns, but it's unlikely.
I think it's unlikely.
Then we have Thieving Grapple. Reaction. After this fighter's move action, if you move through 1 or more enemy fighters during that action, roll 1 attack dice. On a roll of Smash, pick 1 upgrade given to one of those enemy fighters, break that card, gain a swag counter, and this fighter is inspired.
So this is restricted to KG, which is kind of downside, but he has the fly mechanic which is needed to make this one work. And I think it's always a risk when you have an upgrade included in your deck that you can only place on 1 specific fighter.
Yeah.
Especially when there's one such as weak as KG. But that said, I think this is kind of fun. This is thematically a solid 10 out of 10. He puts his rope and he swings, as you mentioned, and he steals some things whilst he's at it. Roll of Hammer, I would really have liked to have gone that like whole distance of Roll of Hammer or crit, so that you had 50% chance of succeeding. Now you're down to 33%. And that chance each time you make a move action, I think it might be alright. I think it's not great, but it's probably a fine upgrade. Somewhat risky. I'd put it in the range of C-.
I don't really like this card. I think you have to pay for it, put it on the fighter. He needs to be alive, first of all, and he's quite weak. A 33% chance to succeed. And that's, I guess, every time you make a move action, but you're likely to only make one move action each turn. So yeah, I think there's just too much to ask here. Thematically, fantastic card, but it's probably like a D- for me.
You might be correct on other thoughts, because if I would compare this card to like a power card or a ploy card, where you would just straight up break an upgrade to an adjacent fighter. This one does the same thing, but you gain one swag counter and inspire, but you need to invest cards and time, and the upside is that you might get this one to trigger twice. Yeah, I think you might be correct. I'll re-evaluate. It's a D for me as well.
Yeah.
We have another upgrade for one of the minions. This one is Pegs, and it's called Tiny Braggart. It's an illusion upgrade. Do not spend any glory points when you play this card. At the end of the action phase, or when this fighter is chosen by a gambit or is dealt damage, break this card. +1 damage to this fighter's range 1 attack action, +1 move, +1 defense.
I really like this card. It's just a free upgrade, and giving him +1 damage, +1 move, +1 defense. That's just strong. I mean, he could die, of course. He's can also die, so it can easily be a dead card. But if he's alive, it's great.
Yeah, and I think just this being an illusion means that you don't invest anything other than the card itself. I think this is a good card. I mean, Pegs really needs some help because he isn't the strongest fighter in the Warband, and this gives him plenty of support. I think this is a B, possibly even an A for this particular Warband.
Yeah, I probably think it's a B, and the reason it's a B and not an A for me is because he is so weak he could easily die, and then it's a dead card.
Yeah, if you draw this in the third phase, then Pegs isn't very likely going to be standing
he's
around.
likely dead. I love, me and him have the same nose, so I like him for that as well. We have the same size nose. So it's a lovely card, but since he could be dead, it's a B for me. And then we have Trogot Grease, and it just says that this fighter is on guard.
And it's restricted to Mange or any minion. And I really like this clean design. A phrase this short is actually really good. I mean, I would definitely like to get this onto Mange, especially after he has been upgraded, because rolling 2 or 3 defensive rolls with being on guard that's hard to kill.
Yeah, he's gonna be very difficult to kill if you put it on the monkey here. So
yeah, and especially if you land him on a feature token, like get him on a Gloom Hex, then he's basically unkillable.
Yeah, and this card is just good. Since it's both the mange and the minions, you're likely to be able to play it on someone. It's not likely to be a dead card, and it's just good. Yeah. I like this a lot. This is probably an A for me.
I think so as well. I think this is an A, absolute A. I would include this in most of the times that I play this Warband.
Yeah, it would be hard to argue to not put it in. Like, it's just good.
Yeah. Then we move on to some of the Grand Alliance cards. First up, we have Land Grab. It's a maneuver that reads, push up to 2 friendly fighters up to 2 hexes. After each push, that fighter must be in no one's territory.
I think that this is good. I think you can quite easily set this up so that this will be workable. You could probably deploy your fighters so that this is usable right from turn 1. You can get into no one's territory if you like. And I've always enjoyed the push cards. I think they're good. There might be scenarios where this will be a dead card and you might not be able to use it, but most of the time you should be able to set this up.
Yeah, and I think this goes up even further if you are playing that aggressive warband and you want that explosive start, so that you get all your fighters in position so that you can launch an attack to the back ranks of your opponents. Because if you get this at the early start of the game, I think it's even better. I think this is a B for me, possibly even an A.
Yeah, in the very aggressive playstyle warbands where you have a larger amount of fighters, this is super good. This is definitely like an A. But in other kinds of warbands, it might be a B. So
Yeah, I'd probably put it at a B because there are times when you won't be able to use this. There are times when it will be a dead card.
Yeah, agreed, but definitely a good addition to the game. I kind of like this kind of tactical card, and it's gonna be plenty useful when you do manage to land it.
Yeah. And then we have Share the Glory. When a friendly fighter's attack action takes an enemy fighter out of action, if this fighter was supporting that fighter, gain 1 spent glory point.
I don't really know if I like this upgrade. It's also a Grand Alliance Order upgrade, but I think that this one being you need to spend too much time to set this up, and the payoff is that you gain 1 spent glory point. And arguably, I think that if you play upgrades, you want to strengthen your fighters or do something that furthers your game plan. And by doing such, you do indirectly gain additional glory points because you're gonna advance your game plan. This one doesn't advance your game plan, this just awards you the occasional spent glory point.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit of a win more card. Killing enemy fighters is not that easy, and you also need to have an adjacent supporting fighter. So I feel like it's a bit of a big ask, to be honest. Then again, it is just 3 glory points, but...
you need to have this guy supporting the other fights, and I don't really know at what time that you easily can set up your Order Warband so that they have those easily supporting attacks.
No, I guess for the Order it might be a bit difficult. They don't have...
Like Sander's Truth Seekers might see some viability out of this one, or perhaps Miari's Purifiers.
Yeah, but they don't have the ability to move together that great. So, yeah,
It's probably like...
You could set up a scenario where you get to score this maybe once every other game, but I don't think that's nearly enough for me. I want more reliability.
Yeah, I think you can probably find better upgrades to put in your deck, so it's probably like a C for me.
I'd probably go as low as D for me. I think that this isn't enough. Then we move on to Grand Alliance Chaos and Victory's Reward. Reaction. Play this after a friendly fighter's range 1 or range 2 attack action that takes the target out of action. Pick 1. Heal 2 on that friendly fighter, or give that friendly fighter 1 guard token. If that fighter is a Khorne fighter, pick 1 or both.
I mean, in the right warband, it might be pretty good. We only have 2 Khorne warbands right now. We have from season 1. And it might be decent. In those warbands, it might be quite alright. And you're probably gonna take a fighter out of action sometime during the game anyway. And you can either heal or give a guard token at that point. So I think it's pretty decent.
Yeah, I think it's actually kind of good card. This being a ploy card that you can just it will happen when you play a Khorne warband. You will kill something eventually.
Yeah, but I think even if you're not playing Khorne, it might be alright, because a lot of the times you're afraid to charge in because you know that there will come follow-up attacks. And if you could follow up, and if you manage to make a successful attack action and kill that fighter, you give your fighter a guard token, for example.
Yeah, and heal them up potentially as well.
Yeah, you've increased their chance of survival. So I think there's quite a lot of usability to this card, and for me this is probably like a B minus. In a Khorne warband, you should probably think about including this, definitely.
Yeah, I think this is a good addition to the game, and it's probably gonna see some play at least. So I think B as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to try it out at least. Yeah, definitely. Then we have Gifted Speed, Mutation, +1 move. Reaction, after a friendly fighter's attack action that takes an enemy fighter out of action. If this card is in your hand, give this upgrade to that fighter. This does not cost any glory points.
Okay, so an upgrade that you can play for free, and the reward is that you get an additional move. I kind of think that this is a weird one. At times this is gonna be an okay card, but I'd probably consider the warband heavily before I put this in my deck. Do I need additional movement? Is that something that my warband is really interested in?
For me, this is probably like a D or E tier, to be honest, because you have to take an enemy fighter out of action, and for that you gain +1 move. But if you have taken him out of action, you're probably charged. You're very likely to have charged. So at best, you have 2 more turns where you can use this. More likely is probably that you have 1. Is that worth it for an entire card in your deck? Yeah, I don't know.
I could see a case being made for this card in those strategies where you want to stack upgrades. Because when you take a target out of action, then you gain a glory point, then you can use that to play another upgrade and then get this one for free stacked onto the same target.
Yeah, in that case maybe, but
So
it's very niche.
Very
it's probably
niche,
still like
yeah.
E plus for me.
Yeah,
maybe.
but this is kind of like those trash cards. I won't call it trash just yet, but I think it's weak. That could be fun to like try out. Maybe you'll catch your friend off guard and like you pull out this combo and it's gonna feel really good when you do it.
Yeah, I mean it's quite. It's not a difficult requirement to achieve,
Yeah,
but
this
I
will
just
happen
think
naturally.
I just think that the effect is too weak to include it.
I think the payoff is that you get to stack an upgrade onto a fighter for free.
Yeah.
That you're not necessarily like interested in move requirement, but it could also add into the future that this mutation keyword on this card is going to have some effect on the game.
Yeah.
Coming up next, we have Plunder the Graves. Shuffle your power discard pile face down, then draw the top card. Return that card to your hand. So you replace this card for any card in your discard pile, basically at random, and you get to replay that card.
First of all, I have to say, like, this card design, I absolutely love it. Like, I love this kind of graveyard stuff from Magic the Gathering. So I think this is a very welcome addition to the game. That said, since it is a card on random that basically replaces this card, I'm not so sure. In some scenarios, you could target a certain card, but
I'm looking forward to playing this card as the very second card of the game. Let's say that I have a card. Let's say it's like a really good push mechanic, or I've played. Let's say that the first card you get to play on a game is Duel of Wits, and then you follow it up with this card. Then you get to play Duel of Wits again.
Yeah. In that sense, it's good.
So if you can set up a scenario where you control what card you place first in your power discard pile, and then you just play this card right away.
Yeah. I think there are quite a few situations where this is good. It gets weaker, I guess, the longer you are into the game and the less control you have or what you have in your discard pile. But I think I'm gonna play this quite a lot because it really goes into the playstyle that I like, the controlling playstyle. So I really like this card. Is it A tier? No, but maybe B minus. With the right support, it will probably be a very strong card. But on its own, it's probably like B minus.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting card that adds to the depth of the game as well. I think that a average player will play this in round 2 and get whatever random card they manage to return from the discard pile. A great player will control what cards they put in their discard pile and then on average get the card that they want to replay. And then you get to replay possibly the best card in your entire deck once more.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good card to consider and I hope to see good results from it. It's B tier for me.
Then we have Vital Spear. This fighter is a hunter. Range 2, rolling 2 dice, looking for fury and deals 2 damage. Reaction: during this attack action, after the deal damage step, heal 1 to this fighter. Heal 1 to one friendly fighter within 3 hexes of this fighter. Instead, if the target has been dealt damage, that will take them out of action.
I think this is kind of weird, but it has a good deal of things like added to this card, so as a whole it's probably alright. I think that the damage step is kinda on the weak side, but you do get the upside of being a hunter if your warband and deck cares about that, and being able to occasionally heal or even heal additional fighters as well, it's alright.
Yeah, I think this is quite alright. There's quite a lot of fighters that have a weaker attack action than this to begin with. And it also has a range 2, which is quite alright. I mean, that can make a huge difference because most of fighters only have a range 1 attack action. So you can stay out of range. I mean, the healing stuff, bit gimmicky. It's I'm not sure that you're gonna play this card especially for the heal. But it's a nice card.
And I think it's one of those things when you put enough of like little things together, you eventually end up with a kind of good upside. I think that this card to some degree require that you do care about being a hunter.
Yeah, I guess so.
But if you have constructed the rest of your deck so that is one thing that either goes into your objective gameplay or some other part of the strategy, this is probably alright. I think this is something I'd consider to play.
Yeah, I think so too. It's probably like C plus for me.
Yeah. C plus seems fine for me as well.
Yeah, just a decent card.
Yeah. And it's good that the game has those. Coming up next, we have Playful Shake. It's a Grand Alliance Destruction reaction that reads: play this after a friendly beast's ranged 1 attack action. If the target is adjacent, deal 1 damage to the target, then push the target 1 hex. So you don't need to have succeeded with the attack, you just need to be adjacent.
I think this is a very good card. So it's basically just deal 1 damage after you made an attack action. And that's really good. Of course, there's not all of the warbands that have beasts, but if you have a beast, why not?
Yeah,
just good.
I think this is really good, and this is like definitely something to consider for those warbands that does have that beast available to them. And it also has the upside that you get to push the target.
Yeah, I don't see any downside with this card. This is just an A for me.
Yeah, I think if you are in that kind of warband, this is an A. I would really like to include this in the proper warband and utilize it as often as I get the chance to.
Yeah, I agree. And then we have the final card, which is Wrecker's Scorn. After you flip a feature token, this fighter is on. You can remove the feature token from the battlefield. If you do, break this card.
There is this like older playstyle of caring about removing feature tokens from the board. And whilst this might go into some legacy decks, I'm not really interested in it. I think that this seems like slow because you need to use this as an upgrade, and then you need to flip the feature token. You can do that in Harrow Deep by simply utilizing it in the power step, but I don't see the upside of including this card in a regular deck.
Yeah, most of the time in a regular deck it's not very good at all. It feels like a niche purpose for the decks that play with the break mechanic and that, which is not many. But I do like that these kinds of cards exist, that you have like kind of support for these really like niche play styles. And for that kind of decks, it's a welcome addition. Is it a great card? No.
Yeah, but speaking of that, I think we should judge this card based on how well it would fulfill its role in the deck that would like to have this feature, like this effect. And in a deck that is looking to remove feature tokens from the battlefield, it kind of depends on what edition that you are playing, but if you are playing Harrow Deep, this is very easily done with this card.
Yeah, it's very easily done.
It basically reads, spend 1 glory point to give a fighter this upgrade, and then you just go onto a feature token and break it.
Yeah. So in that kind of deck, it's quite alright. It's a bit downside that it is an upgrade instead of a reaction, but still it's quite alright.
I think it's a fine card. C if you want this kind of effect.
Yeah, if you're playing that playstyle, it's probably like a B, but in other deck, it's probably like a D.
I think it's even worse. I think it's an E, F possibly. I mean, like imagine that you play your average game. Would you care about breaking a feature token? Removing it from the board? Not often.
But that is all of the cards from the new Blackpowder Buccaneers box set.
We know that there are plenty of other people that get to do this kind of card review earlier than us, but we think it's fun to give our thoughts, and
we would love to hear your thoughts on the matter as well.
Yeah, I had a really good time with you tonight, Mons. Like looking at these cards, trying to speak through them, get a better understanding of them.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I'm starting to get really excited to try out this new Warband and see if we are right in that prediction.
If you can get that Grunderbus cannon turret going.
Yeah, if we're lucky.
We hope that you found this content interesting, and if you do have any thoughts, please share them as Mons mentioned. And if you want to see more of this, give it a thumbs up and a like, and we'll make sure to review future warbands as they get into the Underworlds.
Yeah, we will. So that's all for tonight, and we'll see you all next time.